Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for April 25th through May 1st. This week I read 2 books, I watched 3 shows, I watched 1 movie, and I read 3 audiobooks, but also forgot to talk about an audiobook from last week, so let's call it 4, because I'm going to talk about it this week. This is what happens if I finish a book and I don't immediately write it down in my notepad. I forget to talk about it until I realize while I'm doing my monthly wrap-up that I am missing an image because I didn't talk about the book before. If you want to know all about the books I read last month, I put my April wrap-up out yesterday, which is why I don't feel too bad about this one going up a little bit later this week. If this were a normal Sunday, I would have filmed this about 3 hours ago, but last night we played Trivial Pursuit and there were some beverages and we stayed up really late and no, I was not getting out of bed. But I do want to record this and start editing it before the pizza that we ordered while we were still drunk last night shows up. First thing I read this week was Strong Female Protagonist. This is a graphic novel about this girl who used to be a superhero and then kind of outed herself. There are a lot of people that are superheroes or supervillains in this society because they are all born around the same time, and I think it was to do with a weather event, but I'm not entirely sure how they all got their powers. Now she's just trying to live a normal life. She's trying to go to college, but obviously having superpowers kind of impacts your life. There are a couple of interesting dynamics in this one. For example, there is a supervillain who is no longer really a supervillain and they're kind of friends, and I liked that aspect of it. This wasn't something that super wowed me, but there is a second volume either just came out or is coming out soon, and I will probably eventually pick it up. The other book I read this week was Yes Chef by Samuelsson. I picked this one up because it is a food memoir, which is one of the challenges for Read Harder this year, to read a food memoir. I went through a list of food memoirs, figured out which ones were at my library. This is the first one that they had, and it was a bonus because this is somebody I've seen on the Food Network before, so I'd at least seen this person's face before. Marcus has had an interesting life. He was born in Ethiopia, but his mother died when he was very, very young, and then he and his sister were adopted by a couple in Sweden, so that's where he grew up. Once he no longer made the grade for his local soccer team, he ended up doubling down on cooking, which is something he used to do with one of his grandmothers, and that's the profession that he chose. He's gone all over the world as a chef, currently living in New York City. It was a really cool book to read and it made me really, really hungry. On to the shows I watched. Of course, we're still watching Bones. We're almost at a point where we know a major character dies and we're just like, oh, it's gonna happen soon, and we're not excited about it. It's also interesting how often they use the pattern of Booth being weirded out and repulsed by something, and then Brennan pointing at it and being like, actually, culturally speaking, this isn't unheard of because of all these other different societies that have done the same thing. I like when she puts things in historical or scientific context. It's just kind of fun. We also continued watching a couple of episodes of Malcolm in the Middle, and we're pretty much at the point where none of us really remembers what happens after this point. So I'm sure that maybe we've seen some of these episodes, but we don't really remember. We're at the point where they now have another child. This week I was a little bit bummed out because Friday nights I would watch RuPaul's Drag Race, but there wasn't any more to have because it's done now. That season finally finished. I was like, oh, it's gonna be my first week in a while where I don't get to watch any Drag Race. And then on Saturday, my best friend texted me, all caps, that Drag Race Down Under was on Crave, which is the service that we've been using to watch RuPaul's Drag Race, so I watched the first episode of that. It was really fun to see queens from a different continent. I love that we got to see Taika Waititi in this episode because, yeah, thank you. I was also surprisingly sad at who went home first, not because the other person didn't do a good job on their lip sync, because they absolutely did. This was just a queen that I really liked from the beginning of the episode, and I wanted her to keep going, but somebody had to go home. The movie I watched this week was Thunder Force, which is a superhero movie starring Octavia Spencer and Melissa McCarthy, and it was a lot of fun. Also, just props to Jason Bateman for playing an incredibly weird character and just being completely fine with it. There's probably a bunch of bloopers and behind the scenes takes with him and Melissa McCarthy just being messed up about his whole character thing, but overall it was a pretty fun time. Now we're on to audiobooks, and let's talk about the book that I forgot to talk about last week apparently. That one is Even If We Break. This one has 5 main characters and it's told from the points of view of these 5 characters. They have been playing a Dungeons & Dragons style role-playing game for years together. They're kind of splitting apart as friends. Some of them are about to graduate and there's some things that have happened within the friendship dynamic that makes them not as strong as they used to be. So they're going to this cabin in the woods to basically play their last campaign together. Getting there becomes a challenge because there's some obstacles along the way, and then once they get there and start playing, creepy things start happening. What I really liked about this book is that it had diversity in gender, sexuality, and disability. It's super rare, at least in my experience, where you find mystery thrillers that have queer characters and characters with disabilities, and some of that is overlapping, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. I liked guessing who was the culprit behind the creepy things that were happening in the middle of nowhere. This week I read The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. This takes place in Kentucky in 1936, I believe it was, and it follows a woman who works as a bookwoman, which is somebody who is a librarian paid by the government to deliver donated materials to people in the Kentucky hills. This particular woman has blue skin, and at first I thought this was like a fantasy historical fiction, but this is actually based in truth. There are people, especially a very famous family from Kentucky, that have blue skin. Unfortunately though, at this point they didn't know why the blue skin happened. It is a medical condition. So basically she and her whole family have been looked down upon by the wider population, and she faces a lot of adversity. This is a pretty tough book to read at points because there is sexual assault, there's attempted sexual assault, there's violence, there's so much prejudice. But then it's also incredibly bibliophilic and filled with hope and just wanting to make the world a better place, and she is such an amazing character for that. She spends so much time with her patrons so that they can get books, and then also she'll tell them stories and she'll help people with tasks that they can't do themselves, and it's just lovely. She was a great character, and I'm glad that I learned about this condition because it's an interesting piece of history I just didn't know about. This week I also listened to Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown as read by the author. This is a semi-autobiographical contemporary fantasy about Echo Brown growing up and realizing that she is a quantum wizard. What that means is she can perform minor miracles. This is something assumably passed down by her mother, but her mother wants nothing to do with it, so she doesn't really understand how it works until she realizes she has friends who are also quantum wizards, and they kind of figure it out together. The really interesting thing about the way that this was written is often in every chapter you'd have two different things that are happening kind of simultaneously, except for not actually. It was very non-linear, but you would break between this story and this story so seamlessly. In the middle of a sentence you would slip over into the other story and then slip back in the middle of another sentence later, and the writing style was just so interesting to listen to. This is another hard read because it has to do with abuse and sexual assault and drug addiction and so many hardships that they were facing, but it's also so beautifully written. And this is one of the books that I gave 5 stars in my wrap-up yesterday. The final book for this week is The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharpe. This one was also narrated by the author, which was just really cool back to back. Kathy from editing here to tell you that while I was looking up the cover photo so I could put it into this video, I found out that Netflix is adapting this book into a movie, and it's starring Millie Bobby Brown, and I am super excited about it. Our main character in this one is Nora, and she's about to have a super awkward morning because her ex-boyfriend and her current girlfriend and she need to go make a deposit for this charity event they had the night before. All of a sudden they're in the middle of a bank robbery and they have to figure out how to survive it. She has quite a history, however, in that she grew up with a mother who was a con artist and she was used in a lot of those cons, so she has a lot of skills that will probably become helpful in outsmarting these hostage takers. This one was absolutely riveting because not only did we get to see this heist and how it played out, we also got to see all of these backgrounds and all of these girls that she used to be, because her mother would give her a new name and a new personality every time they moved to a different place to do a different long con, and it was fascinating and horrifying to see what this woman would do to her daughter to make a buck, basically. I also very much enjoy the fact that Nora's girlfriend had endometriosis, and that was something that came into the plot. There's also a note at the end of the book that explained more about endometriosis because the character, when she talked about it on the page, was talking about it trying to just creep out one of the hostage takers because of reasons that make sense for the plot. But the author, who also has endometriosis, didn't want people to think that this was the only thing that you need to know about it, and there are resources at the back of the book, which was great. This was action-packed, it kept me on the edge of my seat, and I very much enjoyed it. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you're on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below, as well as linked to my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist in case you would like to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!